Reprezent.
Joined by James Lavelle from UNKLE right now. James, this is really cool for me, by the way. Thank you so much for being here on a sunny Sunday instead of having a roast dinner. I appreciate it.
Oh no, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
So that was one of the latest releases from your records.
Yeah.
When I first heard that, I thought it sounded a bit like Mark Hollis talk kind of vibe, but like
right,
modern.
Okay. Oh wow, interesting.
Do you think that is in any way?
I don't, you know what? It's interesting because I'd be interested to see what Mink Dorian thought he was trying to achieve with the vocal in that way. Because for me it was sort of more going for a kind of growing up on records like Massive Attack, Unfinished Sympathy and Fresh 4 and Syndicate and records like that. It kind of wanted to do something quite raw beat wise but very orchestral. So I was sort of. But it's interesting you say that because it's totally flipped my perception round of the vocal now.
Just like, especially that first, as it slowly comes in with the vocal.
Right, okay.
I just thought, that sounds really like that. And then I guess it maybe was in my head after that because I read that you worked with Mark Hollis like really early on.
It's like I think Science Fiction's the last record he ever recorded on.
Many moons ago.
Yeah, 21 years ago, yeah.
So that is from your new record, which is called The Road Part 2 Lost Highway.
Yeah.
It's, as I've read, it's kind of like a play of two acts, if you will.
Yeah.
And listening through to it, for me, it's kind of almost like an immersive experience to listen to.
Right.
Was that the intention?
Kind of, yeah, because with this record there was so many it was very eclectic. So that with the way the recording process has been is that I sort of started this process about 3 years ago, and I had a record out a couple of years ago, part 1. And so there was, so there's records that were recorded at that period as well as over the last 3 years. So you kind of have you're shaping, with the first record I sort of had a more of a certain kind of idea. And I think it's a trilogy, and if you think of the first record as kind of like you're leaving home, you're kind of starting your journey, and you're a little bit naive and finding your feet, because I'd kind of found myself in a new situation and was kind of hadn't made a record for a long time, so I needed to kind of find my feet again with what I was doing. A fresh start. And then if you think of this record, it's like 18 tracks. So one, I didn't want to have a record which was just continually 18 tracks, so I split it up into two sections. But it goes from rock to electronic to classical to hip hop to sort of it's very across the board. And so when I was putting it together, I tried to think of I wanted to imagine it as being more like a kind of road trip, like you're in a car, you're driving, and you put a cassette on, as I would have back in the day, or turn the radio on or whatever, and you're listening to all these records and this sort of eclectic mix, or a time lapse where you're sort of starting in the morning and ending at night.
Love it.
And you have all these moments because most of us you don't just want to listen to the same thing all day. So
Man cannot live on bread alone.
Yeah, so there you go. So you have guilty pleasures, you have kind of moments of euphoria, you have moments of getting annoyed, whatever, aggro moments, whatever. You're in the gym, you want to kind of get more hyper, whatever it may be. And so I wanted to try and put that in. That was the aesthetic and how I wanted to put this record together.
Amazing. And you feel like, do you feel like that's what you were aiming when you started, or do you feel like that evolved into something?
I think it evolved because with this part 2, I kind of I knew what I wanted to do very much for the third part, the closing bit, more than anything else. But with this middle section, it was kind of like it kind of needed to be slightly more a little bit more ambitious, a little bit more eclectic, and sort of I sort of thought, it's that thing of a record where it's that kind of, you're stepping out into the world, you've kind of, it's the life's journey, and that was what, in a sort of metaphorical sense in my head I was trying to think about.
So this is your two towers, basically, of the trilogy.
Yeah.
It's got all the action.
There you go.
It's got all the action in it. So the comparison between the song that we just heard and Armour, which is one of my favourite songs. We're going to try and spin it, but you've also picked so many songs to play.
Okay,
We're going to see how many, but one of my favourite songs that has been released in a long time is Armour.
Oh, wow.
I think it's so beautiful. But one of the things I really like is the difference between that and what we just heard. The difference all the way through your music is this like wonderful comparison of all these different kinds of sounds, all these different kind of like textures, styles and flavours. Why is that something that you've championed all throughout your time? Why is that something that is so important?
It's hard to explain. I don't really know. I love things that move and take you on a journey. And I suppose I've always envisioned songs that or in the way that I make songs, because I make records with a lot of visual inspiration, as I try and make films they're like a short film. So they're taking you through acts.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at making a pop record or something which is that necessarily immediate or whatever. They're things that I like, and I like the idea of juxtaposition and trying to throw lots of different influences into things.
Do you ever do this thing where I do this all the time? This is me bearing a little bit my soul to you now, James. When I'm on my own, like on a bus or something like that, and I'm listening to a certain piece of music, I like design either a music video or like a film scene that I think that would go for, like a cinematic, which I could definitely not execute.
But that's how a lot of how I think about when I'm making a track. I kind of there's a real visual thing to it, and a lot of the music that I make is inspired by just people watching, by an experience of a film. I like a lot of visual arts, and that can be as simple as something where it's seeing what's going on from the news through to a billboard through to seeing a film. So visuals have always been really important to how I work.
It like triggers the creative side of
Yeah,
it.
for some reason, yeah.
And they work together. I guess it gives you like a sort of more multifaceted impact when you release something and you're thinking about all of those separate things as an individual.
Yeah, and for some reason, I can, and I'm sure many people do, because that's why we love cinema and TV and stuff, is, there's just drawing certain emotions out of things and sort of imagination. It's just being able to be in an imaginary world, basically. And I think that with when I try and put records together, it's trying to create this universe,
Yeah, escapism is what I'm after.
And this imaginary sort of place, that represents the experience. Some of it being the experiences that you've directly had, and some of it being fantasy, and some of it, all of that stuff thrown in, the future, the past, present. Oh, here we're going deep today.
Oh, that's it. That's what Sunday evenings
It's
here.
a sunny day.
This is why I play all this weird. Yes, it's the hippie hour and
yeah,
Reprezent.
Yeah.
So you have also selected some music to spin, which I'm really excited about, because you picked some absolute.
Well, I got that kind of that typical email. Well, not typical, but it's like, all right, just play some inspiration. So I'm trying to work out what the inspirations are. And then I thought, well, I'd maybe focusing more on this record. So there's I just
Amazing.
Wrote down a load of records that kind of, during the process of making this record, were kind of things that were being thrown around or referenced or talked about or whatever.
The first one I'm going to play, I'm so glad that you picked this, that you picked Queens of the Stone Age, because when I got the sort of selection after I wrote a lot of my questions, I was doing some like the looking up, and the thing that I wrote about first of all was how I got first listening to you, because I think I was about 19. And the reason that I started listening to you in the first place was because after a party sometime, like 5 a.m. and you're sort of there drinking lots of whiskey, playing, there's two of you left and you're playing music to each other. Yeah. And I must have mentioned how much I love Queens of the Stone Age, and then they played me Restless.
Oh, right, cool.
That song with you and Josh Homme.
Yeah.
And this kind of made me think in a wider sense about how special collaboration is, because I discovered you through him, I suppose. Great. But then there's all these artists like Mink, like Elliot Power, like all these amazing artists that you work with that I've discovered because of you.
Brilliant.
That seems to be like quite a big thing for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think if that's the wonders of communicating through music, and I'm fortunate I get to work with some people that are more established, but it's also brilliant to work with people that are coming up, and but equally it's interesting that the juxtaposition. So if somebody may well be more into a certain area of music and discover you through that because you've worked with people that might be more into rock and listen to Queen suddenly discover UNKLE because of that collaboration, or vice versa, and that's brilliant to me, because it's all that joining the dots, because sometimes I think people think, oh, Josh is over there and somebody else is over there, and actually we all tend to sort of end up just liking good music, and when you can meet in the middle and collaborate and people sort of discover things in that way, it's brilliant.
Yeah. All right, so shall we have a little listen then? This is Queens of the Stone Age, first of all. Why did you pick this song in particular?
It's a record I always go back to. I love it. Again, I like records that I like sweets, that journeys that take you into different places, i.e. like the biggest example of something like that is Bohemian Rhapsody or something, or Paranoid Android. It's taking you on all these different sections. this is the record that really turned me on to Queens of the Stone Age. There's, I recorded some of this record in Josh Homme's studio with John Theodore, who now plays drums with them, Troy, who's in the band, Chris Goss, who produced this record, amongst various other people. Josh actually, unfortunately, was ill, so he didn't make it on the cut. But I love, when it goes into drums and the break, it was kind of, for me, when I started doing War Stories and those sessions, I wanted to find a new kind of drum sound, and this was the band that kind of blew my mind in the way that the drums were. But it samples Bjork, so I thought it was quite fascinating.
Beautiful. I did not know that it sampled Bjork. Oh, amazing.
Represent.
This opens up an idea of wider collaborations. You've worked with Josh Homme, everybody, Ian Brown, Mark Hollis, all these people, Tom York, and that is very fascinating and very interesting. But what I also really, really love is that always alongside that, you've seemingly anyway been so open to working with lesser known artists, newer artists, younger artists, maybe artists that are stylistically very far away from maybe what you'd create. I imagine it's very different working creatively with an artist that's very established or one that isn't. What are the kind of different...
Not really.
No?
Just depends. I mean, I think it's just really a temperament thing.
Okay.
I think most of the time you're connected by a kind of, there are similar connections. And so there's a sort of certain kind of dialogue. And certain people, depending on their ability, are either more sort of confident or not. But it doesn't really depend. I've worked with some of the most established people who are very difficult and very up and coming, who are unbelievable, like mind blowing, and vice versa. Not mind blowing, just or more confident, and vice versa. So it really depends.
And do you feel like you're always do you feel like you learn different things from that people in different positions?
Yeah, totally. And I think the thing with when you're doing a lot of collaborations, it's sometimes it's a sort of game of managing things as well. So there's all this other sort of there's a lot of moving parts to
admin.
Deal with. It's not just admin; it's emotional admin at times.
Right.
Yeah, which can be great and also can be quite draining.
Right. So what's your next selection that you're going to be playing for us today? We've got a little bit of Roberta Flack, which this song makes me feel sort of like there's sun inside my heart.
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful records recorded, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really done cover versions before, so on the new record there's a cover version of this track.
Amazing.
With a really beautiful singer from West London called Keaton Henson.
Keaton Henson's I discovered through you as well.
Right,
I looked that up, yeah.
Who is just extraordinary. His voice is sort of in the Tom York vein of things, It's sort of he's or Jeff Buckley and that sort of. Well, he's unreal, to be honest with you. He's got some pipes. His emotional pipes are pretty unreal. And we did a show at the Royal Festival when I did Meltdown, and he did Rabbit in Headlights, and it was pretty extraordinary. Yeah. So there's a version of this song coming on the new record, which kind of actually came out a while ago, but I did a reversion of it. And it never got released properly. It was one of those things that kind of veered its head up and disappeared.
It just popped up like a little meerkat.
It popped up on a 7-inch for a minute, and then I just reworked on it. So it's interesting. On this record, there's 2 cover versions that end the album, which I've never done before. Each act. But anyway, so I've done a cover of this, but we should play the original because it's so. It's not. Keaton's performance is pretty damn good, but this is pretty hard act to follow.
I don't think anyone
definitely set myself up.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would ever try and better Roberta Flack. You can only homage.
But then again, you've got what's interesting is Roberta Flack is a cover.
Yeah.
So it's in a sort of. It's quite apt that you're allowed to cover this one because hers is a cover.
Hers is a cover.
Yeah.
But is she one of those covers that would be in a pub quiz, like covers that you think are covers but aren't covers?
No, I think a lot of people, you associate some people. It's like Nothing Compares to You is Prince. It's not actually, Prince wrote Nothing Compares to You, not Sinead O'Connor, but you would associate it to Sinead O'Connor. And again, when you get into writing songs, you'd associate, I don't know, My Way with Frank Sinatra, but he didn't write it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, he just got all the
You know,
glory.
most record, you know,
He got all
yeah,
the glory.
yeah, yeah.
Represent.
So you've been selecting and taking over the playlist for a while. One of the reasons I was really excited that you were going to do this, especially in the context of the new record that's coming out, is I know that part one of the record that's coming out now, you mentioned in an interview about how you doing your own radio show made you look at music a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think in more the sense that I spent so many years in clubs, and when you're in clubs, you tend to play a certain way.
Sure.
You know, unless you want to clear the dance floor constantly, you know. So, and I haven't been playing so much in that way, and I started doing a radio show a year ago, and so it was more for this record, for the Road Part 2, about it, sort of how just being able to play in a more eclectic way kind of just got me back into a certain kind of headspace, really. And it's been great. I really like playing on radio.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you find that because you've been making sort of like mixes and things like that for such a long time, do you find that it works a different part of your brain when you're having to do it?
Yeah, even though when you're doing but the thing with the radio is it's like when I was younger, like you know what, now you do a playlist, but you know, doing a cassette, you know, doing a mix on a cassette, like a mixtape, and but it not being just always about you're not giving it to that person to play in a club necessarily, or it's just like, I like these records.
Yeah.
And so with radio, it's kind of like you can go, I like these records, but when you're sort of playing to, you know, a couple of thousand people and they all want to go, you know, they're in a certain kind of headspace. You're playing music that you love, but you're not, you know, there's, you know, it's, you know, I like quite a broad spectrum of music.
Sure.
So if I want to play something like a classical record or a, you know, a noise record or some kind of weird, you know, you can play whatever, and it's nice. But it's also what I find about doing a radio show is that it forces you to regularly engage, because I like to play contemporary records as well. So I play a cross section of music from the past and now, and so it kind of it forces you, and it really got me in a place of just constantly listening to more and more and more music again, which has been really good.
Such a pleasure, isn't it, to do? I you know, when you find a song that you love and you just think, I can't wait to play this on my show, I can't wait to buy this record and pocket it and play it forever. And I guess, the difference between doing it live, you don't have like 250 people going out to have a fag as soon as you play something.
Yes,
They
it
don't
just doesn't, you know. But it all adds up. I mean, I think, you know, I grew up DJing, that was the foundation of what I do, and so whether it's in a club or on the radio or, you know, at home, you know, it's how I like, and the way of how I you know, DJing works is in this idea of cutting and pasting, putting things together, and I like DJs. I grew up in DJs that, you know, take risks, and you know, so people like, whether it was a Norman Jay or a Giles Peterson or a Harvey or whatever, you know, I liked they were prepared to kind of educate and entertain.
Yeah.
And that aesthetic is just how I've always worked in what I've done creatively. It's a collage kind of mentality, a sampling mentality, you know.
Yeah, that's really cool. Because it's not like almost like the John Peel way of doing things, which is almost like, here you go, this is excellent, and that's what you should think.
But you know
it's
what? There are
like
DJs that are very good at doing that as well, and John Peel was very good at doing that.
Oh yeah,
you know?
amazing.
But so it's also, you know, so I think there's this amazing craft to how you can get music across to people, and that defines, you know, brilliant DJs are incredible at doing that, you know. To see, when you see whether it might be, I don't know, you know, somebody playing a 20-minute noise, you know, bleep record that really doesn't do anything, but the place is going crazy because they've managed to weave it into the way that it's hit at that moment in time in a club, or, you know, when you hear a record that you've never heard before on a radio station or in any, you know, whatever, in a club or whatever, and that person, those selections it's something it can be amazing. And I think curation is really important. I think especially now, because we're so blasted with, you know, so many kind of formats and so much information constantly, that curation is important, and good DJs are really great curators, you know.
And do you think it's harder to sort of reach that now with, you know, we're in such an algorithm based world online where people can say, and you might like this and you might like that and you might like this?
I think, you know what is really interesting, I heard a statistic the other day is that 9 out of 10 people in the UK listen to radio. Adults listen to radio, 9 out of 10.
Wow.
So obviously people still want to and get, there's something about curation, there's something about feeling, something about being part of something, there's something about discovery, and I think that's where the algorithms get it wrong, because to be honest with you, when I get my new release radar on Spotify each week, it's pretty bad half the time, I've got to say. So the algorithms aren't right for me.
Yeah.
Some of them are, but they'll be really obvious, the things that I get, and I'm like, yeah, but
are they like, James, have you heard of Massive Attack?
Yeah, do you know, seriously, yeah, it'll be something like that, but I think, but then again, how do most records really break on places like digital platforms? Curated playlists. So curation is, you because there's, it's just about the trust you put in people, and it's no different than when I was growing up on radio, you'd have your daytime Radio 1 DJ. That wouldn't appeal to me, but I would want to get a Tim Westwood cassette, or a Kiss FM cassette. So again, it's about how somebody connects to you. And I think you need connection. Music is about connection, and sometimes that thing of, it's what I love about radio is, I have the radio on all day in my house, in the kitchen, just, old school style. I like just having that kind of, but there's something about the feeling of somebody playing something to you.
And you loving it, isn't it? And then,
or you not, and going, why did you play that?
But them connecting with you.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, I actually think this song is going to connect with a lot of people, because it is one of the timeless, put it on at a party and everyone's going to love it. Later on, Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah,
is up next.
So again, sort of referencing this new album and stuff. There's a couple of moments in this record which was quite guilty pleasure for me, which I sort of stepped a little bit out of the Uncle box on that level.
Right.
And
everyone needs a bit of guilty pleasure in their life.
And there's this one song with a really great singer called Tessa, who's I've just been working with lately, and it's very sort of California Americana, and I love Fleetwood Mac. Rumours is one of my favourite records of all time, as it is to another, I don't know, 100 million other people. But I recorded most of Science Fiction in the room that Fleetwood Mac recorded Rumours in.
Did you lick the walls?
Pretty much. Well, it definitely was, maybe not licking, but other part of the body. We won't go into that,
Represent.
I want you to tell me about, in particular, the Syndicate, because I've never heard this before. And I just listened to it on the way here, basically, and was like, this is... And it was sunny and it was lovely. I was well up for it. So why did you pick this?
Because funny enough, like when you played Only You, the track with Mink and Will Malone, this is the sort of kind of records I was referencing in my head. And so Syndicate came out at the same time as Blue Lines and Young Disciples. These amazing kind of eclectic posse collective records that came out from in the beginning of the 90s. And Crazy Noddy, who started Syndicate, was one of the first British hip hop DJs, and he's in sort of the first hip hop documentary with Tim Westwood in Britain, and I grew up on, for me, these were like people that were my heroes as a 13, 14 year old. Like these groups like Syndicate were like, they were the coolest people you'd ever seen. They had, it was all like kind of the way the haircuts were and the whole the look and everything, and I don't know what happened to Syndicate. Unfortunately, I think Massive Attack and Soul to Soul kind of really went stratospheric, and Young Disciples, who made one of my favourite records of all time, sort of never made another record again, and nor did these. But what's interesting with this is that there's this couple of tracks on there with this, I can't remember the singer's name, but the production's really interesting because it's suddenly like kind of slightly pre-Timberlandy, kind of production and stuff like that. But yeah, so this track is kind of goes back to sort of sound system days and what I was kind of going back to with these sort of slightly more rawer breaks and stuff like that.
Represent.
I want to know why you picked the Beastie Boys. I'm sure there are a few reasons, but why have you picked it today to play on the show?
I Check Your Head is one of my favourite records of all time, and it's double record, so I was working on a double record. And, and also just because the way some of the sounds are and stuff like that, there's a couple of tracks on the album that sort of, the way this record and the record after sort of sounds really inspired me.
So it's just the way it was put together.
Yeah. And they're just, I think it's quite interesting. I like a multitude of voices. So what I really and what I loved about Queens of Stone Age, for instance, when I heard their first record, and especially Songs for the Deaf, and a record like Check Your Head and The Syndicate and Massive Attack, and is that you're going between these sort of different styles of music and different vocals a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I always saw a connection. So when I was growing up, to me it was like you had sort of Massive Attack in Bristol, and then to it was like the Beastie Boys were the kind of equivalent, even though musically it was very different. To me, it had a kind of, because of, and also with hip hop records, you know, whether it was growing up on De La Soul or you know, a lot of native tongue records or posse records, you know, would have kind of, you'd have lots of different people collaborating on tracks, you know. And Beastie Boys, you'd have things like on this record, you'd have on Check Your Head, you have people like Biz Markie, and you know. So I just, it's a wider aesthetic than just a musical style sometimes for me, you know.
It's like the way it's put together.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So we're going to play So What You Want.
Yeah.
Before that, though, thank you so much for taking the time out to come onto the show.
My pleasure.
It's been my pleasure, honestly. Before we go as well, you're playing soon in London. Your new record's out soon. Tell us about that.
19th of April at the Royal Festival Hall, and then 18th of April at by the Royal Festival Hall, was doing a thing called Concrete Lakes, where the QEH and the Jack Purcell Room changes into a sort of nightclub. So doing that on the 18th, and yeah, I don't know, spinning plates as usual. Records coming out on 29th of March.
Beautiful. So we look forward to hearing it all
you.
in full. I will be spinning it on here.
Brilliant.
Represent.